Hey everyone, and welcome back to Daily Tuition. In this tutorial, we're going to look at two different ways you can filter your data with for loop and regular expression. Now you're not limited to only search your product with title. Instead, you can search your product by category, by price, by description, and so on. That's upon you. You can search your product and get the result what you want. So before taking your too much time, let's get started and see how to filter your products. So I'm going to open the Visual Studio Code editor, and inside that I'm going to open tutorial folder. Inside the tutorial folder, I have here an asset folder, and inside that I have here a PNG file. Just for the example, I'm using this PNG file. Inside this root directory, I'm going to create a new file with index.html name, and along with that I'm going to create style.css file. In the index.html, I'm going to create a simple HTML5 snippet with exclamation mark and then specify title, filter. Just out that inside this header section, I'm going to link the style.css file, something like this. Now, just out of that, I'm using Tailwind to style this complete tutorial. So I'm going to open my browser, and here I'm going to search for Tailwind CSS CDN. Instead of installing Tailwind inside this project, I'm using Tailwind CDN. So I'm going to click on this cdnjs.com website. I will open this cdnjs.com. Just copy this minified version of this Tailwind mean.css. and paste that before this style.css right up here, something like this. So now you can access all the classes of Tailwind using this CDN. Just out of that, inside this body, here I'm going to create the main section of this tutorial. So I'm going to first create here a container, and here I'm going to create h1 heading tag, and then I'm going to specify title here, filter, products. Let me save the changes and open this index.html in the live server. So I'm going to right click here and say open with live server. I already have live server extension installed in my VS Code. So once I have the index.html, let me toggle this VS Code on the right side, something like this. Just out of that, here inside this container, I'm going to add here a class called mx auto. To center the container, we are using mx auto class. Just after that, I'm going to specify some classes of Tailwind to this h1 heading tag. So I'm going to specify here class, then I'm going to specify text center to center this text. So you will get this text here. Just out of that, I'm going to specify here text 3XL. This is going to change the font size of this h1 heading tag. Just out of that, I'm going to specify here font bold, and I'm going to specify padding top 24. This will add top padding. And now what I want to add font family to this h1 heading tag. Instead of using the inbuilt font family, I'm using Google font. I'm going to search for Google font, click on the Google Fonts website, and from here I'm going to get this Poppins font. I'm going to simply select this regular 400 style, this one, and import this using this import statement. I'm going to copy this import statement and paste that inside the style.css, just like this. Just down here, I'm going to create font Poppins class to add this font family to the HTML element. So I'm going to create here font Poppins, and then you can see here I have here a font family Poppins. I'm going to copy this and specify that here. Let me save the changes, and now whenever I want to specify Poppins font family to the HTML element, I can simply use this class. So to the index.html, to this h1 heading tag, here I'm going to specify font Poppins. When I say the changes, you can see I'm going to have the font Poppins font family to this h1 heading tag. Just out of that, just down here, I'm going to create form. So I'm going to create here a form tag, get rid of this action attribute because we are not using it, and then I'm going to specify here a class. Class is going to be text center to center all the text, and padding y is going to be 4. So this will add top and bottom padding to this form. Just out of that, I'm going to add here input text box, and to this input text box I'm going to add placeholder filter. Let me save the changes, and now you can see I have here the input text box. Just out of that, I'm going to specify here id to access this input tag very easily. I'm going to specify here id filter input. I can easily access this input tag with this ID. Just out of that, I'm going to specify some classes to it to make it more prettier. I'm going to specify bg gray 200. This will specify background color to this input text box. Then I'm going to specify text gray 800. This will specify font color. Then I'm going to specify width is going to be 2 by 4. This will specify 50% width to this input text box. Just after that, just after this width, I'm going to specify padding y 2. So this will specify top and bottom padding, and padding x is going to be 3. This is going to specify left and right padding. Along with that, I want to add font family. So I'm going to add font Poppins class. Save the changes. So I'm going to have the result what I want. Just after that, I want to add some border radius to this input text box. So I'm going to add here a class called rounded MD. Save the changes. You can see I'm going to have this rounded border. So all these are the Tailwind classes. We don't need to write any CSS code to beautify the input text box. You can see. Now you can see when I click on the input text box, I'm going to have this black border. I want to remove this black border from this input text box. To do that, I'm using a class called focus outline none. Let me save the changes. And now when I click on the input text box, you can see I don't have this black border now. Just for that, let me specify some color to the placeholder. To specify color to the placeholder of input text box, you have a class in Tailwind placeholder gray 800, something like this. Save the changes. You can see I'm going to have the placeholder color to this input text box. Now if you want, you can change this color according to your need. That's upon you. This is just for the example. Now once we have the input text box, let's create a grid here. Just down here, I'm going to create the product grid. So here I'm going to say div with products class. I'm going to specify some Tailwind classes. I'm going to add here grid. This is going to initialize this div as grid system. Then I'm going to specify here grid calls 1. Now let me explain this class. This class is used to specify one column space to this grid. Just for that, here I'm going to specify md grid calls 2. So now what I want, when the viewport is small, I want one column. When the viewport is for medium size of devices, I want 2 columns. So I'm going to specify here md grid calls 2. And when the viewport is for large devices, I want 3 columns. So I'm going to say here lg grid calls 3. I want 3 columns on large devices. And after that, I want 4 columns. So I'm going to say here xl grid calls 4. So this is how we create a simple grid using Tailwind. So I want 1 column when the viewport is small. When the viewport is for medium devices, I want 2 columns. When the viewport is for large devices, I want 3 columns. And when the viewport is larger than that, I want 4 columns. As simple as that. And just after that, I'm going to add some padding here. Padding is going to be padding top 12 and gap is going to be 20. This class is going to add gap between all the columns. Let me save the changes. Just after that, here I'm going to create my first item. Means my first product. You can name this division tag anything, that's upon you. So here I'm going to create item class, something like this. So this is going to create a division tag with the class item. And inside this, I'm going to add my product. We are adding product using JavaScript, right? So I'm going to create here a template of the product and then grab this code and put that inside a JavaScript. Let me show you what I want to say. Here I'm going to say item, and then inside it, I'm going to add an image, the image tag. To this image, let me specify an image here. I'm going to specify my asset folder and my image. Just after that, I'm going to specify here a class, which is going to be bg cover and img. Img is my custom class. So let me create that first. So I'm going to simply open this style.css, and here I'm going to create .img, and then I'm going to specify width is going to be 250 pixel and height is going to be 350 pixel. Along with that, I'm going to specify some background fallback color to the image. So I'm going to specify here RGB A color. So I'm going to specify RGB color here 224, 224 and 224. So this is going to add some light gray color to this background. So this will add the fallback value to the image. Save the changes. And here you can notice I'm going to add this image, and alt attribute is going to be image1, or you can say img1. Just after that, once we have this image, let's create a title for it. So let me save these changes first. So this will add an image here. Let's create a title for this. So I'm going to create here a division tag with the class text center. Then I'm going to add here some padding by 3. So this will add top and bottom padding, and add here font poppins, the font family. Here I'm going to add an h1 heading tag with the text product title. Now I'm going to replace this product title with the API values. So I'm going to add here class to this h1 heading tag. I'm going to first add here text lg. Then I'm going to add here title and save the changes. Just after that, just out of this h1 heading tag, I'm going to add here an anchor tag. And then I'm going to specify here class. Class is going to be block. Then I'm going to specify here a span tag. And to this span, here I'm going to add a text category. Let me specify some classes to it. Here I'm going to have categories. Let me specify classes, which is text sm. This will specify font family, and text red 400 is going to be specify color. Just after that, just out of this anchor tag, here I'm going to create span tag again and specify here a $sign. And inside this span tag, I'm going to add another span tag. So I'm going to add here span again, something like this. To this inner span tag, let me specify some classes first. So I'm going to simply specify here text md and specify price here 12.99. And to this outer span tag, let me specify some classes, and here I'm going to specify block padding by 3. So this will add top and bottom padding to this span tag. Just out of that, at the end, let me add here a button. So I'm going to add here button with the text buy now. And to this button, I'm going to specify class of tailwind. So I'm going to add some tailwind classes here. So let me specify first border 2. Padding X is going to be 8. So this will add a left and right padding to this button. Then I'm going to add here padding Y 1 and BG yellow 400. So this will add background color to this button. Let me add here border and rounded MD, something like this. Now the button is completely ready. Now just for that, let me center this image. So to this item, I'm going to specify justify self center. So now this is my first product with the title, category, price, and a button. So next we're going to work on JavaScript and add multiple products inside this document, and then I'm going to show you how you can filter them. Once we understand how we can create our first grid item, let me show you how you can create multiple products with the use of API. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the API, the fake API data from the fake storeapi.com and create multiple products inside this project. So I'm going to just open the Explorer tab, and here I'm going to create a new file for JavaScript. I'm going to name this file beginner.js. That's upon you, you can specify any name to this file. And I'm going to link this file to index.html. So before the closing body, right up here, I'm going to say script. I'm going to specify /beginner.js. Something like this. Save the changes, back to the beginner.js, and here I'm going to add a comment, something like this, and using this link, I'm going to grab the data of the products. Using this fake storeapi.com, you can get the free API data for your products. So I'm using this link to get the fake API data. Let me show you how you can get this. I'm going to use your fetch function to fetch the data from the API. I'm going to say here fetch. Inside this parameter, we need to specify the link. So I'm going to specify this URL here in the single quote, something like this. Then this fetch function is going to return a promise. So I'm going to get that promise. So I'm going to say here then, and inside then, I'm going to specify response, and I'm going to convert this response into JSON first, something like this, and then I'm going to print that. So I'm going to say here JSON. Once we convert that into JSON, I'm going to get that JSON and print that. I'm going to say here console.log and say here JSON. If you want, you can call here catch method. That's upon you. So let me save the changes and show you the result. In my console, you can see I'm gonna have here my API data. You're gonna get 20 demo products using this API. With these products, you will get the categories, description, ID, the image URL, price, rating, and the title. I'm using these properties and specify a value to my product. Let me show you how to do it. So just out of this fetch, right down here, I'm going to create here a function. This function is going to get the value from the API and create dynamic element. So here I'm going to say function add element. And to this add element, I'm going to pass two arguments, append in and value. Inside this function, I'm going to say let div is equal to document dot create element. I'm going to create a new element, or you can say a new node of division tag. Just out of that, I'm going to specify classes to this division tag. So I'm going to say here div class name is equal to, and you can see here in the index.html, we have some classes to this division tag. I'm going to create this item div. So I'm going to specify all these classes to this division tag, something like this. Just out of that, I'm going to get all these properties from this object. So to get that, just after this division tag right down here, I'm going to create let. In the object, I'm going to specify image, title, then specify category and price is equal to, and specify value here, this argument value. So when we call this add element, I can pass here this JSON data, and inside this JSON data, as you know, we have all this data, and I'm going to grab all these properties using this statement by destructuring it. Make sure the name of these properties are exactly same. So from these values, I'm going to get all these properties. Just out of that, to this division tag means to this item, we're going to add all this HTML element. To add that, just out of this statement, here I'm going to add div dot inner HTML is equal to, and here I'm going to add template string, something like this. And inside this template string, you can add your HTML. So I can copy this and paste that right here. And now just out of that, instead of these hard-coded values, I can pass data from the API. So I'm going to get rid of this, and here I'm going to add a dollar, curly braces, and inside this, I'm going to add image, this first property, then to this product title, here I'm going to add a dollar, curly braces, and add here title. Then to these categories, right down here, I'm going to add dollar, curly braces, and then specify category here. Then to this price, I'm going to add dollar, curly braces, and add price, something like this. So I'm going to specify all the property values to this HTML. And at the end, we need to append this in the grid system. So we're going to append this inside this division tag. So to do that, let me add here a statement, append in dot append child, and I'm going to call here div, this one. So I'm going to append this division tag inside the append in, and I'm going to pass value to this append in when we call this add element. So here to this append in, we're going to pass this product division tag. So at the top here, I'm going to add let grid is equal to document dot query selector, and inside this I'm going to add dot products. So I'm going to simply grab this division tag, this one, and pass that to this append in. So I'm going to append all this data inside this grid. Now just out of that, once we have this add element, we need to call this. So inside this callback function, instead of this console.log, here I'm going to simply add element and then pass here first the appending where I want to append this HTML element. As you know, we have this HTML element inside the item. We already have this item variable here, and inside this item variable, I'm going to put this elements. So I'm going to put this item inside the products, inside the product division tag. So I'm going to pass here grid, because inside this grid variable, we have this product division tag. And as a second argument, I'm going to pass value, means the data. So I'm going to have data inside the JSON. So I'm going to pass here JSON. Now you can see here, we are going to get the data of the type array. Inside this array, we have a type of objects. So if I try to execute this statement, I'm going to get an error message. This is because we need to iterate over this JSON to get the data. So inside this fetch, here I'm going to add a for loop for iterating products. So I'm going to add here for let value of JSON. I'm going to use for loop here. I'm going to say for let value of JSON, and inside this I'm going to add this add element, and instead of JSON I'm going to pass here value, because inside value we have the iterated data. So this is going to iterate over the array, pass all the objects to these values, and we're going to grab properties from that object and display that. So let me save the changes and show you the result first. When I save the changes, you can see I'm going to have the data what I want. So we're going to get this data from the API. So we successfully created the dynamic HTML using JavaScript. Now what we need, instead of getting this data every time when we save the changes, I'm going to create a file for that and store that data locally. So instead of getting this data every time from the API, I'm going to store this data inside the JSON file. So we'll quickly get that data as soon as possible. So let me just copy this link. I'm going to grab all this data back to the Explorer, and here I'm going to create a new folder, database, and inside this I'm going to create a new file, store.json, and inside this JSON I'm going to put all this data, something like this. So I'm going to paste all this data inside this file, save it, close this file, and now if you want to use this data of this file, you can simply get rid of this link from here, and instead of this link you can specify /database store.json. Now when I save the changes, you can see I'm going to get all my data. Now let me save the changes back to the index.html, and let me comment this division tag, because this is just for example. And now let me show you how you can filter this product with the titles. So if I type men's cotton jacket inside this input text box, I only want this men's cotton jacket. So let me show you how you can add this filter functionality to your project. To filter this product, what we are going to do is, we're going to first get the value from this input text box, and then I'm going to compare that value with this product title. I'm going to iterate over this product title and match that value. If we get the product matching with this input text box, I'm going to return that object. So let me show you how to do it. So what we are going to do is, just down here, I'm going to add here a command to add event listener for the input text box. So here I'm going to first get the input text box. So let me first say here, let filter input is equal to document.getElement by ID, and in the parentheses, right, inside this double quote, I'm going to put the ID of the input text box. We have the ID to this input text box, which is filter input. I'm going to specify that right here, something like this. Let me just save the changes. Just out of that, once we have the filter input, just down here, I'm going to add event listener to it. So I'm going to say here filter input dot add event listener. I'm going to call a method add event listener, and I'm going to call an event here which is key up. So when we press the key and release it, I'm going to execute the callback function. So here I'm going to call a callback function which is filter products. Now let me create this callback function just down here. I'm going to say here function filter products, something like this. So this is what we call the callback function of this event listener. If you want, you can create this callback function inside this parenthesis as well. That's upon you. Now inside this callback function, I'm going to say here let filter value is equal to filter input. I'm going to get the input text box and then call dot value. I'm going to get the value of the input text box and pass that to this filter value. So if I just say here console.log something like this with filter value, when I save the changes, and now if I type something in this input text box, I'm going to get that value inside this console. So if I type here M, you can see I'm going to have here M. If I type E, then I'm going to have ME as a response. If I type here N, so this will just going to return the value of the input text box in the console. So once we have this value inside this filter value, let me first convert this value into uppercase. Because to match two different strings, you have to first convert all that string into uppercase and then match that. Otherwise, it will return false. Because you know that the title is in camel case. So user will not type the camel case title. For example, user will not type men's cotton jacket. User will not type something like this. Instead, user will simply type men's cotton jacket. So this input tag and this title is not completely matched because we have the camel case syntax to this title. So to match this input tag and this title, we need to first convert that into uppercase. So we're going to convert this title into uppercase. So I'm going to say here value dot to uppercase. I'm going to call this function to uppercase, save this file. And now if I type anything inside this text box, you can see this is all converted into uppercase. Now once we converted this input text box into uppercase, we need to convert this title as well. We'll do that later. Let me comment this console, and up here I'm going to say let item is equal to grid dot query selector all, and I'm going to select item. As you know, inside this index.html, we have this item division tag. I'm going to select all that item division tag and specify that to this item. Now, just for that, I'm going to iterate over all these items and match the filter input with the title. So here I'm going to call for loop. So I'm going to say here for I let I is equal to 0, I is less than the item dot length. So I'm going to iterate this for loop until the I is less than item dot length. And then I'm going to say here I plus plus. So this for loop will iterate 20 times because we have 20 values inside this API array. Now just for that, inside this for loop, here I'm going to get the title. To get the title, I'm going to say let span is equal to item, this division tag, and then I'm going to pass here I. And then I'm going to say dot query selector. Here I'm not using query selector all because we only have one span tag inside this item. You can notice here we have only one h1 heading tag here. So I'm using here query selector, and inside this I'm going to add dot title. I'm going to match this input value with the title. So I'm going to select the title using this title class. Now if you want, you can use categories as well. That's upon you. I'm using title. So I'm going to specify here title. So this will return all the titles to this span tag one by one. So once we have all these titles inside the span tag, I can match it with this filter value. As you know, when we type anything, this add event listener is going to call this filter products, means this function. And this function is going to first get the value from the input text box and specify that to this filter value. I'm going to convert that value into uppercase and then store that into filter value. And using this for loop, we're going to iterate over the item variable, means I'm going to iterate over all this product, get the title of that product using this statement, and just down here I'm going to say if span dot inner HTML, means this title dot inner HTML match with this filter value, then I'm going to execute this if statement. Otherwise execute the else statement, right? So let me add a valid condition here. So I'm going to first get the span tag. This will return the title of the product. Then I'm going to get the inner value of it, means it will return the inner value of the title, this string, and then I'm going to convert that string into uppercase to uppercase. So this will convert the title into uppercase, and then I'm going to say dot index of. I'm going to call a method index of, and in this parenthesis here I'm going to specify the search string. I want to search for this filter value inside this title. So I'm going to pass this filter value in this parenthesis, something like this. And if it is greater than -1, I'm going to execute the if statement, otherwise execute this else statement. But let me first explain the use of this index of function. Index of function is going to search for the string specified in this parenthesis. For example, let's say if I have a mango inside this title, and then I'm going to type M inside this input text box, then the index of function is going to match this M with this title. So it will find this M at the first index right here. So it will return 0 as a response. So if 0 is greater than -1, I'm going to return the if statement, otherwise execute this else statement. So if this index of is going to find this M inside this string, it's going to return that index value, otherwise return -1. So once you understand how this index of function work inside this if statement, here I'm going to say item of I dot style dot display is equal to initial. In the else condition, I'm going to specify item of I dot style dot display is equal to none. So I'm going to hide all the items of the else condition. That's it. Let me save these changes, and now let me search for the product. So for example, if I search for this men's cotton jacket, if I type here men's, you can see we successfully searched for the men's cotton jacket. Let me try something else. Let me search for this white gold plated. If I search for here white, you can see we have the search product here. So you can search any product according to your need. Now let me show you how you can do the same thing with regular expression. Now this is what I call a beginner technique to search for the product. Let's move to the advanced technique. In the advanced technique, we're going to use regular expression to search for the product using title. We use our own custom function to search for the title. So let's see how to do it. So I'm going to open the Explorer tab, and here I'm going to create a new file in the root directory, and I'm going to name this advanced.js. Just out of that, I'm going to link this file to the index.html. Just out of this beginner, here I'm going to add a script tag, and then I'm going to link advanced.js, something like this. Let me back to the beginners, and here I'm going to comment this listener, something like this. Just out of that, I'm going to back to the advanced.js. So let's create a function inside this advanced.js. Here I'm going to create a new function, and I'm going to name that function match. So I'm going to create here function constant match is equal to, and then I'm going to pass here some parameters. So inside these parameters, I'm going to specify values, filter by, and input. I'm going to pass value to this parameter when we call this match function. So I'm going to call here an arrow, something like this. So this is what we call the ES6 function. Now to call this function, I'm going to simply call here console.log and call the match function. Inside this function, I'm going to create constant p is equal to array dot from, and inside this from, I'm going to specify the iterable array. So I'm going to specify here input. So as you notice, I specify here this parameter value inside this from. So when I call this match, I'm going to pass array inside this third parameter. Just out of that, I'm going to specify here reduce, the array method. The reduce method executes user-supplied reducer callback function on each element of an array. So inside this reducer, here I'm going to add a, and then I'm going to simply call arrow and pass that a, something like this. And now let me show you the result. I'm going to say here console.log and print this p. And to this match, I'm going to pass a value. So to this input parameter, I'm going to pass a value here inside this parentheses. So just for the demo, let me add here an array, something like this, and pass this value to this match. Let me get rid of these values right from here because right now I'm not using it. And now you can see we have the first array as a response. So this a is going to return the first array. Now just for that, what if I add here another parameter? So if I add here a comma v, then let me show you what the v is going to return. So if I specify v here, save the changes, you can see we have the last array value as a response in this v parameter, right? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use here regular expression and grab the matching value of the title. Now just for that, what if I add here another parameter, I, for index? So if I print here I, save the changes, you can see I'm going to get 6 as a response. This is because we have 6 values inside this array. So this I is going to return the value of the array. So we're going to iterate over all these 6 values using this index, and then we're going to match our input value with this array. So instead of this I, here I'm going to add the regular expression. So to add the regular expression, I'm going to add here template string, and then I'm going to call first here $a, the first array index. Then I'm going to call here bracket, something like this. And then inside this square bracket, I'm going to add the regular expression. And at the end, I'm going to match this sub-str, this input value, with the ending value. So I'm going to pass here star, question mark, and the last array index value. So this regular expression is going to match our input value with these array values. Here I'm going to specify comma and pass double quote. Now just for that, we need to initialize this syntax as regular expression. So I'm going to say here constant re is equal to regexp and pass this p here, something like this. And just for that, just down here, I'm going to return values dot filter. Now as you know, we don't have this value parameter, so let's add it. I'm going to add here values. So I'm going to specify values to this match function when we call it. So I'm going to say here values dot filter, and inside this filter I'm going to say v, call a function and say v dot match. I'm going to call this match function right inside this function, and then I'm going to pass this re variable, this regular expression variable. Now let me comment this and pass the values to this match. So what we are going to do is I'm going to specify input value and the values. So as a second argument to this match function, I'm going to pass c. Let me save the changes and show you the result. You can see as a response, I'm going to get 4 index values, which starts from c character. You can notice and save the changes. Then you can notice this is not going to match and return anything. This is because we exactly need to match all these values. As you know, we specify input value in capital letters, but we have small values inside this values variable, inside this array. So we need to convert that into uppercase. So once we get all these values, I'm going to convert that to uppercase first. So I'm going to say here to uppercase, something like this, and then call the match function. Let me save the changes. And now let me show you the result. As you can see, right now I'm going to get only 3 array values. If I remove a right from here, this will return 4 array values. So now you can use any character here to match with these array values. So we are using the second argument to match with these values. So now once we understand how to filter this array, let me show you how we can filter these products. So I'm going to back to the beginner.js file, and I'm going to grab this fetch function right from here and specify that inside this advanced.js right down here. Get rid of this statement. Just out of that, I'm going to get this event listener, specify that here at the top, uncomment it because we are using this in this advanced.js file, and then I'm going to create this filter product inside this advanced. So just down here, I'm going to say function filter, I'm going to say filter product and call here a function, and inside this function I'm going to call this fetch like this. Now just for that, inside this fetch, let me grab the user input. So I'm going to grab this statement, the first statement. So this will just grab the user input using this filter input value and convert it into uppercase. So I'm going to grab this, paste that inside this advanced.js right here, and right down here I'm going to call my match method. So here I'm going to say let filter data is equal to match. In the parentheses, as you know, we have the array as a first argument and the input as a second argument. So let me pass that. So as a first argument, I'm going to pass this JSON. Here what we have, all the data, and as a second argument we pass this filter value, which we'll get from the input text box, and then we're going to add this filter data using add element function. But as you know, inside this JSON data we have the array of object. We created this match function to iterate over an array, so we need to just change few things of this match function. What we're going to do is, as you know, we are searching for the product using title. Here I'm going to add another parameter called filter by, and as you know, inside these values we have this JSON data, means our API data, and inside our API we have title, description and all the properties. So once we have all these properties inside this variable, I'm going to get only the title using v in the bracket. I'm going to specify filter by, something like this, and here I'm going to simply specify in the single quote title. So now I'm going to filter all my data using title. So if you change this title to categories, you're going to filter your all this product data using categories. So this is super easy, right? By just changing one word, you can completely change the search result. Now just for that, just down here I'm going to add for loop. So I'm going to say here for constant value of filter data. So I'm going to iterate over this filter data. Inside this filter data we have the filter values. I'm going to iterate over this filter data, and I'm going to say here add element, and here I'm going to pass grade and value, this variable. Let me add a comment here, something like this. Save these changes, and now let me show you the result. Oops, I think I'm missing something. Values is not defined on the line 26. Yeah, let me comment this as well. Save this, and if I search for men's cotton, then I'm going to get this men's cotton just down here. This is because we successfully added a new element inside a grid, but we also need to remove the previous items from the grid. So what we need to do is we need to first remove all these items from this grid and then add a new one. So at the top, right up here, I'm going to say while grid dot child nodes dot length, if it is greater than 1, then I'm going to say grid dot remove child, and then I'm going to specify grid dot last child. So this is going to remove all the childs from the current element. Save this file, and now let me search for this men's cotton jacket. If I search for men's cotton jacket, then you can see I'm going to have the result what I want. So if I search for this first product, if I say here FJA, then you can see I'm going to have the result what I want. So this is super easy, right? To search for the product using regular expression. And now if you want to search the product by categories, you can simply change this title to category, something like this. So if we just specify here electronic, then you're only going to have the product with the category electronics. You can notice. I'm going to leave here title, save these changes. So I hope you understand both different ways to create and filter the product using JavaScript. If you find anything useful, don't forget to press the like button, share this video with your friends, subscribe for more latest videos. That is all for now. I will see you in the next one.